Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and it is Booktober, the time of year where we listen to spooky, dicky, electric swing and talk about books. Booktober is brought to you by your local library, a great place to try out books without having to buy them, and relies on readers like you to do circulation in order to keep their funding. So please patronize your local library. Now, last time we went over some middle grade fantasy books, and then we went into young adult fantasy. And this time we're going to finish up in young adult fantasy, talk about some young adult science fiction, and dip our toes into adult fantasy. Now, the adult fantasy book is actually more of a new adult book than an adult book, but new adult still doesn't have its own shelf section, so we're just going to have to deal with the fact that it is shelved in the adult section of the bookstore. So let's get right into it. So today we are starting with a duology, okay? And it's called A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin, and it has a sequel called A Venom Dark and Sweet. So, my caveat again on this one is if you are going to read these books and they sound interesting to you, get them both out at the same time, because A Magic Steeped in Poison ends on a cliffhanger! Ah! So read them together, cover to cover, right back to back, whatever, and if it sounds interesting to you. So, A Magic Steeped in Poison is a fantasy Chinese drama. And if you like Chinese dramas, you're probably going to love this book. So I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 ginger snaps. And in a Magic Steeped in Poison, Ning has recently lost her mother, and the entire country is being plagued by poisoned blocks of tea. And the emperor is on his deathbed. It is possible he's been poisoned or he is very, very ill. And his daughter, the crown princess, has decided to hold a contest to get the next advisor who uses tea magic for the kingdom, okay? And Ning has an invitation. Technically, it's her sister's, but she has an invitation to come join this magic contest and become the next tea advisor. And she has to go because her sister has also been poisoned, and she wants to win so that, she can get the cure for her sister. So it's very urgent that she wins and she doesn't fail this contest, okay? And of course, right off the bat, you are heavily invested in Ning's success because you want her to win. You don't want her sister to die. You can tell she really loves her sister. And you really want her to get to the palace, succeed in, fooling them that she's actually her mother's apprentice when her sister is her mother's apprentice. And she's actually her father, the doctor's apprentice. And you want her to win the contest. And she does have tea magic. It's just that, her sister was supposedly better at it or something. And, her mother could only have one apprentice or something like that. I don't know. I thought it was a little weird. So she gets to the palace. She enters the contest. She starts making friends. And, she meets a mysterious boy at the market. And it turns out that he is the son of the exiled prince who tried to take over the empire from the emperor, and he's might actually be a bad guy, but she feels connected to him. You know, they did some team magic and she feels really connected to him. She's not sure if he's as bad as he's saying, and you know, oh my god, the princess, you know, maybe wants him dead, or maybe he wants the princess dead. All sorts of political palace intrigue. Now, well, this is what I mean. If you love C-dramas, and if you've watched any C-dramas, you're going to recognize all these like little tropes and stuff right off the bat. And if you like that sort of thing, you're really, really going to love it, because it does it really, really well, and the story has a lot of tension to it, because, you know, is she going to succeed at all these trials? Is she going to be able to find a way to, you know, use her magic? Is she going to have the right ingredients for the tea? Is she going to, you know, win? Is she going to win and get through the contest without dying or being kicked out? And, you know, is she going to cheat? Maybe, just a little. Who knows? And it really felt like a C-drama written down in a book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I felt, you know, really connected to Ning. You know, I wanted to root for Ning. I wanted Ning to win. And then, you know, we got to the cliffhanger, and I was like, oh, I need the other book. I need to go get the other book. Where's the other book? You know, I had to run to the library, order it, have it sent to me from another library so I could read the sequel and read how it all ends. Now, in a Venom Dark and Sweet, I'm not going to tell you if she wins or not. You're going to have to read the book to find out if she wins. But she and the princess and the princess's guard are now on the run. FYI, there is a very background lesbian relationship. If that bothers you, it's just there. It exists. It's not, like, blatant or anything. It just exists, okay? And it's a little bit more important in a Venom Dark and Sweet than it is in a Magic Steeped in Poison. But it's just there. I mean, there's nothing. It's like mentioned once type of thing. So in a Venom Dark and Sweet, they go on the one. And this is where it goes from being a 5-star book to being like a 3-star book. They go on the run, and they're trying to get a certain magical object, certain answers to their questions before the general, the emperor's brother, gets to it and manages to transform himself into a god of chaos type of thing, a serpent god of chaos. And they have to, you know, they're on the run, they're getting away, and so you have Ning's story, and then you have the love interest story where he feels kind of conflicted about what his dad is doing, and is it right, and, you know, should his loyalty be to Ning? You know, what about this whole fiance thing he had going on with the princess? We won't mention that they're cousins, because nobody else does in the Eastern dramas. So we have this, it's kind of like the conclusion, you know, are they going to make it? Are they going to win? And it lacked that structure that the competition had. It took you out of the palace for the most part with Ning and that. And, you know, the magic that they ended up using, every time you felt like there was something's going to go wrong, they're going to be caught or whatever, she comes up with some sort of new magical ability and the problem just goes away. So it didn't feel like there was as much tension in the second book as there was in the first book. And I think it really felt flat because they took you out of that palace and they took you away from the structure of what was going on. You know, if the princess had stayed at the palace, if they'd stayed at the palace, they might have been able to, you know, do some things that would have helped the people there. It didn't really feel necessary. And the way that she resolved the whole kind of prophecy or song thing that was going on in the book wasn't satisfying. I didn't, I expected something completely different. And I wanted some tea magic to be part of the solution. And when you get to the end and you get to this big scene and there's no more tea magic, and I'm just very confused. So I don't know. It felt really lackluster compared to the first book. So 3 out of 5. I still, though, if you want to know how it ends, just get the 2 books together, read them back to back. Just be aware that the second book is not going to be as interesting as the first book. because you want that political drama, and there's just not the political drama when you're on the run and everything like that. So, just so you know. Alright, let's move on to young adult science fiction. So the first book we're going to talk about is actually more of a science fantasy, maybe speculative fiction, and I consider it young adult, but I believe it's on the adult section of the bookstore if you want to buy it. And I'm not sure why, but it's Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. Here is the caveat. And you're going, Jenny, you have a lot of caveats. Yes, I have a lot of caveats. If you have not read, I don't know, Mercedes Lackey, if you haven't read, not Anne McCaffrey, there was this, like, book series with this, like, the five elemental rings or whatever. If you haven't read a lot of other science and fiction and fantasy, especially ones that deal with types of religions, you're going to be confused. This book relies a lot on tropes and a lot on knowing how science fiction and fantasy religions and societies are set up. You might be very confused if you go into this book without having read, I don't know, other science fiction and fantasy stuff, or having not played Guild Wars, or looked into the Guild Wars religious system, or you haven't played D&D, or something like that. Because it does get explained, but it gets explained towards the end of the book, and I know a lot of people were getting confused. Now, the agent who represents this book also represents Jim Butcher. Jim Butcher is currently right over here, or at least some of it. The rest of it's still over there. But she also represents Jim Butcher, so I don't know if I need to be finding more books represented by this agent or what, but, like, just so you know. So it's Gideon the Ninth, and what's going on is that the Emperor has invited the heirs of each of his loyal 9 houses to a deadly trial of wits and skill up at this big tower somewhere, and, they have to solve all these riddles. And Gideon the Ninth is supposed to be helping Hero Hawk, the heir to the 9th house, as her swordsman. And Gideon does not want to be the swordsman for the 9th house. Gideon would just like to take off and leave, thank you. And Gideon is kind of wrapped into this, and when they get up there, people start dying. So now they have to solve the murderers, keep people alive, and still solve all the troubles and wizards and skills and puzzles and all that in order to win the Emperor's favor, because the 9th house is dying. It's the house of death, but it's dying. And if they don't get more children or whatever soon, they're just gonna completely fade away. So Gideon, by the way, is female. I know it's a male name, but female character. And there is a blink and you'll miss it, oh, that happened romance between Gideon and Hero Hawk. Now, I have a high bar for romance. So when I say oh, that happened, that's not a good endorsement, okay? So, oh, Gideon and Harrowhawk happened. Okay, that's it. Gideon the Ninth is in a limited third POV. It's also a kind of dark comedy. If you don't like dark comedy, you might not like this. You really have to be understanding of the kind of goth aesthetic that is going on here. What is that store? You know, like almost like a Spencer's Gifts Hot Topic goth aesthetic that's going on in this book. That's why I consider it more young adult than adult, just because it just reminds me of, you know, going into Hot Topic as a teenager, which puts me as a 90s kid. I'm so sorry. But Gideon has a very strong voice and, you know, makes a lot of jokes and stuff like that, and I really found it funny. I found that, you know, them running around and trying to solve the mystery of what's going on and solve the murders and solve, you know, the mystery of what is actually going on in the ninth house, too. Like, what happened? Whose fault was it? It was all very intriguing, and, you know, there was, like, clues throughout that you were like, once you got to the end, you were like, oh, that makes sense. Once everything was explained, you know, once you got all the explanations out of the way, everything started making, you know, kind of sense, and then, you know, the book ends. It's like, I want more of that. Well, I guess I'll have to get the sequel at some point and read the sequel. Basically, I've been waiting for, I believe, Elector the Ninth to come out. So when Elector the Ninth comes out, I'm probably going to get all 4 books and just read them, you know, back to back until I'm done. And I think I just really liked it. I liked Gideon. I liked the aesthetic. I liked the way it was laid out, and you know, it was just a fun kind of read. And I, at times, do have a very dark and dry sense of humor, so that might explain it for why I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoy like the found family parts in Bishops, so you know, the kind of dark fantasy. Sometimes she goes a little too dark for me, but you know, as a general rule, I'm okay with a dark comedy. And if you like a dark comedy, especially since it's October, now would be the time. If you haven't read this book already. So, 5 out of 5. The next book we're going to talk about is War Girls. Oh. And I'm not going to spend very long on this one. War Girls is a young adult science fiction, which I would actually shelve it adult. And the only reason why I got through War Girls was because I was reading it for my local librarian. Because she wanted to know if she should put it on the shelves. And I got to the end, and I don't want to give this one a rating because I don't want to be that cruel. I got to the end, and I have been accused of being an analytical reader by my librarian, by Marcy. Not Fran, but by Marcy. And I got to the end, and I was like, this is not one book. This is technically 3 books that needed to be split up, and it was a story in search of a plot. In War Girls, it's basically Gundam in Nigeria. We have it's by Tochi Onibuchi, I believe. That's how it's pronounced. Oni and Iffy dream of more. Okay, that's what it's on it. Oni is a pilot, basically a big mech pilot, and she is trying to defend her country, which the country of Nigeria is saying, you know, it's a rebel country, they don't have the right to exist, so there's this big war going on, and Oni has been part of this war since she's a small child. Well, Iffy is then kidnapped and brought to Nigeria. It's revealed she's actually a Nigerian, as the book defines them, and she is given this schooling and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be this book about sisterhood, but the huge problem was both Oni and Iffy thought both of each other were dead. Okay, and so it wasn't like they were looking for each other. And Oni, once Oni and Iffy split up, the book did like 2 different time skips. And okay, it's a story. Okay, it has scenes that go together cohesively, and you get that belong together and that sequentially. Okay, there was no plot. There was no overall plot where the Oni and Iffy had major goals that they were trying to accomplish, and there was no character plot either, because the characters weren't learning and growing anything about anything. Like if he started out as like this, I don't know, she was like 12, 14-year-old girl who was a bit of a brat and accidentally brings the Nigerians to the rebel base, and and is taken off by them, and because she invented something. And then she kind of falls in love with her captor, which was really weird. Like, he considered her his brother. You could tell he was using her, type of thing. She never actually had any sort of emotional character growth, and Oni never really had any emotional character growth either. So it's one thing to say, Nigeria, Gundam in Nigeria. And Gundam, by the way, was a very adult property when it first started. Robotech, Gundam Wing, those were very adult cartoons. So there's a lot of heavy topics in here, and I just was like, I feel like this got published because it was an Afrocentrofuturism, and I really wish it had just had more editing. There was something there. It really needed a lot more editing, and it needed to be moved over into the adult section, even though the characters were quote-unquote teenagers. I will not be picking up the sequel. It was just, like I said, if I hadn't been reading it for my local librarian, I would not have finished it. It was just progressively worse as time went on. Alright. So the next book we're going to talk about is Victory is Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. And I'm giving this one a 5 ginger snap rating. I really liked this book. So, in this book, Tina has known since she was a kid that, she's actually an alien, and one day the aliens are going to come back and she's going to take up her destiny in the stars. So it happens, the thing goes off in her chest, her homing beacon goes off, and the aliens come and rescue her, they think her, and then she finds out that she's this clone of a war hero. The war is still going on, and they expect her to be, this great strategic genius, and, but things are going wrong. Like, she knows everything about what's the alien stuff, like Wikipedia, but she has no personal memories of her life beforehand. And she, brings a friend with her, and they decide to recruit another couple smart kids to help them in this war, because the good guy side is getting, shrinking, and they've made a lot of promises that they can't keep. And, so Tina is still determined to be on the right side, to do the right thing, to be, to be a hero, but she can't be the alien general that everybody wants her to be. She's just Tina. No, I really enjoyed this. I mean, okay, Tina's just a little bit, she's a teenage girl who grew up on Earth, and she, she's like an alien or whatever. But you can tell that she's really struggling to do the right thing. And she also brings like her best friend with her, Rachel, who is an artist, and who she's been missing because Rachel had to leave school because she was being bullied so much. And they bring on a couple more people, and they're like, we're gonna be the Earthlings, we're gonna stick together, we're gonna do this. And they get to the whole point of the book, like what's going on, and she really, she does what she says she's going to do. She has these thoughts, she has these second doubts about herself, and there are points where she's like, okay, well, I can't do this right now, but we will come back for you, type of thing. We promise we're gonna have to, we gotta do this first, type of thing. And everybody's, that they brought on board, their abilities, their talents are become important to the greater overall fight. And it really felt like there was this great, like, little message. And yes, it was kind of slapped upside the head. But, sometimes it's okay to take a hit. Here at home, you are okay. Your talents are fine. You are good. You are a good person. You don't have to be this great hero. You can just be yourself with the talents that you have. And I really liked that. I felt it was really uplifting, and that it was something that sometimes you really need to hear, and it made sense in the overall story. And I looked at the back of the book, or I got to the back of the book, I got to the ending, and I looked at the author's note, and the author's one of the first things that she mentions was that when she was a kid, she dreamed of going off and having adventures in space. And now that she's an adult, she gets to write about going off and having adventures in space. And it really felt like there was like this point of view there coming through, that these were things that she had in her mind even as a kid, and she wanted to go out and have space adventures, and she was just writing a fun space adventure book, and I really appreciated it. Also, there is a lesbian relationship in this book, and by a lesbian relationship I mean an actual relationship, not a blink and you'll miss it. So if you want a book that has a young adult book that has a lesbian relationship in it that actually plays out as a lesbian relationship, then this is a book for you. You will like it. I have absolutely no issue with it. I hope you can find it at your library, type of thing, or you can order it or something. But it felt like a really good, well thought out, well written story. I have the sequel on order, so there's that too. Like, yay! Okay, so the last book we're gonna go over today is a adult book, and I've read this way last year, so my brain is a little fuzzy on all the details, so I had to go through all these like reviews and summaries to be like, okay, that's what happened. It's called The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, and I believe that's a pseudonym for somebody else, but that's the name it's published under, Catherine Addison. And I want to give it like a 4 out of 5. Alright, so Sci-Fi has invaded fantasy. Just so you know, this is a political fantasy. This is in kind of like the political science fiction tradition, but it's a fantasy. Maya is the youngest half-goblin son of the Emperor, the unwanted son. He's been living his entire life out in the countryside because he was not supposed to inherit. Because he had 3 older brothers, and, well, and his father was very healthy, except there was an accident. And now he has become the Emperor. And he has been snatched up from the countryside and taken to the palace to become the new emperor, and what does that mean for him? He's all alone by himself. He doesn't have any friends. He has no idea how intrigue works and who's doing what. And that's kind of the book. Alright. So I give it a 4 out of 5 because as for poly fantasy, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's doing what it says it's doing. I have different expectations for political-based books than I do for, genre, action, plot-based books. This is, when you have a political intrigue and you have your main character as the emperor, they're going to have a lot of limitations put onto them versus what they can and cannot do. So you go into that with that in mind. And if you really like political sci-fi, if you like political intrigue type of books, you're probably going to like this one. It is kind of slow paced, but it's also very uplifting because Maya is kind of pushing back against society and what has been going on for so long, and he's trying to develop, actual friendship relationships versus just, you know, trying to find a wife or trying to figure out who's doing what. So, I believe my notes on this one were, I'm not sure if Maya was really the main character. With everything that was going on in the background and what Maya was trying to do as he putted around trying to figure out what his schedule and everything was, and it was, I don't think he really was the person that we needed to be following. Now, the second book the sequel has a character that is supposed to be solving mysteries or whatever, who might have been better to have as the main character of this book too, and have all of what was going on with Maya and everything in the background. The reason why I consider this new adult rather than adult or young adult is it's a lot more hopeful than most adult novels are, and it goes through like a journey. It's very character driven. If you like Maya, you're gonna like it. It has a lot of flowery type prose into it. It's very much more of a literature than a actual fantasy book as we mostly understand it. And I mean, it felt very hopeful. It felt very progressive. If he was trying to change things, and you could tell that he could be a good emperor as long as he wasn't killed and didn't make any fatal mistakes. But he really wasn't the main character. And I understand the temptations and the reason to wanting to write this story. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure that this was really the actual story in the book that needed to be told. I don't know. It was good. I don't know if I'd read it again, but once again, if you like political science fiction, or if you like the idea of political intrigue and science and fantasy, and you're looking for a read that's uplifting and hopeful, and you don't get confused by names, I guess a lot of people thought the names were confusing. I didn't, but way too much fantasy. Way too much fantasy where odd names are just normal. You might enjoy it. I see why it got published, okay? It's a very solidly written book. Yeah, I can't really give it much more praise than that, I guess. It's going to fit a certain need. So if you don't mind a little slow, and you don't mind a little like deliberation, and you don't mind the whole intrigue, and you don't about it, you might enjoy it. But I still don't think Maya was the main character. What was supposed to be going on plot-wise, for the character, yeah, he was the main character. But for the plot, what plot there was, he was not the main character, which was unfortunate. Okay, so today we have gone over a Magic Steeped in Poison, which was a 5 out of 5, and a Venom Dark and Sweet, which was a 3 out of 5, a historical C-drama in book form with magic and contests and poison, intrigue, really fun. Then we also went over Gideon the Ninth, which is young adult science fiction. It's a dark comedy. If you enjoy dark comedies, I gave it a 5 out of 5. If you enjoy that type of thing, you're gonna like it. But do read some other fantasy books, or at least brush up on your your D&D, your Guild Wars type of religions. Get to know your astrology houses, maybe. I don't know. You just make sure you have some sort of understanding of fantasy tropes before you really dive into it. It will all be explained, but I don't want you to be confused. The next one is War Girls, and I did not rate this one because it needed a lot of work. Basically, my summary is a story in search of a plot. And so I don't honestly recommend this one, especially since it's labeled young adult, but the themes and the content are either later young adult, 18, 16, 18, or even adult. Victory is greater than death. I am giving that another 5 out of 5. A really cute science fiction story where, you know, it's okay to be yourself. You don't have to be these great heroes. Your talents are enough. Adventures in space. So, yeah, lots of pronoun use and a good lesbian relationship into it that actually felt like a relationship that was building up. So, we'll be seeking out the sequel. And lastly, The Goblin Emperor, which is poly science fiction has invaded fantasy. So this is a book about intrigue in the emperor, you know, kind of a fish out of water almost story, learning to become the emperor. Very hopeful and uplifting, if a little bit slow in pace and deliberate, okay? So, take care of yourself, my lovelies. Bless, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video where we will talk about more books for this Booktober!